peace and security in Fucus.
1.7 million people with heating support, winter clothing, shelter repairs, emergency energy solutions, and cash. The plan prioritizes households in front line and collective sites where freezing temperatures could turn already dire conditions into deadly ones. We urge member states to act now so that emergency supplies are in place before winter hits and conditions make it far harder to reach those in need. Mr. President, allow me to close with 3 urgent messages to this Council. First, civilians and civilian objects must be protected. The scale of civilian death and injury and the destruction to homes, schools, hospitals, and displacement centers must stop. Disproportionate and other indiscriminate attacks are strictly prohibited. Second, ensure humanitarian access. All parties must facilitate safe, rapid, and unimpeded access to civilians in need wherever they are. The Council and all member states must exert their influence to ensure civilians are protected and humanitarians can reach those in need. Third, support the response. Ukrainians cannot afford delays or donor fatigue. Every contribution counts. Mr. President, this war continues to inflict suffering on a staggering scale. The trauma is daily, the destruction is widespread, and the resilience of civilians is being pushed to its limits. But our commitment to assist them must not waver. Thank you.
I thank ASG Masuya for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. And to begin with, I give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to thank Assistant Secretary General Masuya and Assistant Secretary General Jenča for their insight and contribution to today's discussion. And I welcome representative of Ukraine in the chamber. Mr. President, today's briefings painted a comprehensive picture of the latest developments on the ground, and the picture is grim. Civilian casualties are on the rise. Homes, schools, and hospitals continue to be destroyed. To top it all, there is no end in sight to all the death and suffering. Since the beginning of the year, Russia has been escalating its aggression. By March, Russia was launching more than 1,000 drones and missiles per week, terrorizing Ukrainians in their homes and shelters night after night. This month, the attacks have been particularly destructive. They culminated on the 9th of July, when Russia launched its largest ever aerial attack, using more than 700 drones and missiles. This vividly illustrates the accelerating pace of the escalation. This month alone, Russia has launched more than 5,000 drones and missiles. The ramped-up aerial attacks have a devastating impact on the civilian population, as we heard. As the briefers pointed out, the numbers of civilians killed or injured have been rising sharply in the first half of 2025. In fact, June was the deadliest month for Ukrainian civilians in 3 years. In addition to all this, civilians across Ukraine are each day exposed to arbitrary detentions, torture, executions, and sexual violence. These acts are an obvious violation of international humanitarian law. Slovenia condemns the aggression and the latest escalatory steps, Mr. President. Slovenia welcomes all diplomatic efforts toward a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, including the latest meeting between the two countries held last Wednesday. We welcome the agreement on the POW exchange in this regard. However, the outcomes of both previous and recent talks remain insufficient. Instead of genuine peace talks, we are witnessing a surge in drone production. Instead of respect for international law, more and more armaments are being procured, including from countries under UN sanctions. Instead of reuniting families, Ukrainian children remain displaced and deported. instead of a ceasefire, Ukrainian cities continue to burn. Mr. President, we are in a desperate need of a change of pace. We need action to prevent further civilian deaths and finally make a decisive step on the path to peace, as implored by this Council last February. For months, we have listened to pleas of members of this Council for ceasefire. To little avail. Enough time has passed. This Council needs to act. We need a ceasefire resolution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would also like to thank Assistant Secretary Jenča and Assistant Secretary General Masuya for their briefings. Colleagues, we are once again gathered in this chamber to address Russia's ongoing illegal war of aggression against Ukraine, a war that continues to escalate in intensity as the Russian Federation persists in its aggression against its sovereign neighbor with increased ferocity. Mr. President, allow me to make 3 key points. First, in recent weeks, we have witnessed the most severe attacks against civilians across Ukraine in over 3 years. A relentless and sustained Russian blitz of drones, missiles, and bombs has inflicted death, destruction, and despair. Kyiv has been subjected to intense overnight missile and drone attacks. Suppression of the truth. The reality on the ground tells a different story, as we also just heard from Assistant Secretary General Masuya. This is in clear violation of international humanitarian law and constitutes a callous disregard for civilians. Second, Mr. President, Russia's disregard for international law is having an outside impact on children who suffer some of the gravest consequences. For 3 consecutive years, the Russian armed forces have been listed in the annex of the Secretary General's annual report on children in armed conflict for committing grave violations against Ukrainian children. From the latest report, we have learned that Russia's actions in the past year have reached new levels of brutality. In addition to the unlawful abduction of thousands of Ukrainian children, Russian forces killed and maimed 671 children, according to the report. They also attacked over 500 schools and more than 300 hospitals. This marks a 60% increase in child casualties and a staggering 150% increase in attacks on schools and hospitals compared to 2023. We recall that civilian objects are protected under international humanitarian law and must not be targeted. Denmark fully supports the Secretary General's call for Russia to immediately cease all violations against children. We urge Russia to take concrete steps to prevent further violations by developing and implementing a joint action plan with the United Nations. Third, Mr. President, Russia's senseless, full-scale aggression continues in its 4th year. It must come to an end. For months, Ukraine has been ready to agree to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. We call on Russia to accept this offer without any delay. Such a response would reflect a genuine commitment to peace. While we welcome the agreement on new exchanges of prisoners of war reached in Istanbul this week, we cannot ignore that the Kremlin continues to pursue its illegal and brutal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This week, Russia has continued to destroy cities, killing civilians, and targeting civilian infrastructure across Ukraine. These actions undermine the foundations for peace. Mr. President, in conclusion, while Russia's attacks intensify, we increase our support for Ukraine. We reiterate our call for a just, sustainable, and lasting peace in line with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. We have reaffirmed the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of Ukraine. Denmark will continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, until the Ukrainians can once again live in peace and freedom in their own country. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci.
Thank you, President. At the outset, I would like to thank ASG Miroslav Jenča and ASG Joyce Msuya. Thank you for your briefings, which recalled the gravity of the situation. President, a week ago, President Zelensky said once again that he was prepared